This is the Making Waves podcast. My name is Dave Roman. We're here with Dan Goeller, and he's the creator, the founder of Leninists on the Prairie, which deals with issues like DEI and woke issues in South Dakota. Welcome, Dan.
Thanks for having me.
You were just at the Minnehaha County Commissioners meeting. How did that go?
They gave us an opportunity to express public comment, but then I don't know if it's a regular rite of passage to sort of be talked down to by, Joe Kippley or not. But that seems to be, he basically was very dismissive and frankly kind of offensive to those of us that took our time to go out and just, express the opinions of the people they represent here locally in our government. And, we were there to express concerns. And so it's always kind of, a little bit discouraging to go out and spend your time and effort to really bring things to the attention of the commission that you want them to really consider when they're making decisions and implementing policies. But anyways, it was good to have an opportunity to talk about it. And so I appreciate the opportunity to be here today to talk about those same issues.
And those issues are, why are nonprofits fundraisers being conducted on government property?
That's correct. Yeah, it doesn't really make much sense that we would provide exclusive access to one organization to raise money utilizing taxpayer-funded employees' time and resources. I mean, that's really two issues because, first of all, it doesn't seem like any, nonprofit should have the use of taxpayer-funded, municipal or government agencies to conduct their fundraising practices. And let me make it clear, I'm not talking about, oh, my daughter is selling Girl Scout cookies, would you like some? That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about a comprehensive fundraising campaign that not only employs the use of volunteers within the government agencies, but also utilizes their equipment, their resources, their payroll service. So in other words, monthly checks are mailed out. When somebody decides I want to make a donation, they actually use the payroll service to process those payments from their paychecks to fund the donations that they say they want to allocate to this organization, whom we should name. It's the Sioux Empire United Way.
Seems to me that any situation like that, I would feel as an employee that I was obligated to contribute, or I would be on the outs, that this is really kind of intimidating. You have to really stand up and say, no, I don't want my money, my paycheck to be deducted for this organization when it's kind of a semi-official.
Yeah, one of the problems that I hear frequently from other people who have United Way campaigns in their offices, whether they work for the government or the schools, and they're public employees, but many of the private corporations and businesses also in the Sioux Empire also conduct these. And they talk about this culture of coerciveness, right? They feel so much pressure. It's like it's like sitting through a timeshare meeting or something. It's like, how do I get out of this? Could I say no? I just want to leave. But, everybody is sort of expected to participate. And they would say that's not the culture they create. That's not the intention at all. But the problem is, you are given a card which says, even if you don't want to participate, would you please still mark no on the card and then turn it in? So, wow. I know, it's just sort of like, if it's something voluntary where people wanted to do this on their own time and they wanted to organize it through their network of people within their office, I could understand. People do that all the time. Mm-hmm. But when you're holding it on the property, you're utilizing public employees, you're utilizing the email, the payroll service, probably some printing and, other resources to copy and duplicate, different things that you're posting around the office and that sort of thing, or who knows what other kinds of things that they might be using. It just doesn't seem appropriate because it raises a fundamental question of why this one organization has such, carte blanche access to our public employees and no other organization does.
And they're doing this on the time, that payroll time. In other words, they're being paid to be there for these organizations.
Yeah, I mean, they would say, oh, it's over the lunch hour or whatever. It's not just on the lunch hour. And all of it, the United Way brags about how they utilize volunteers to run the campaigns, but I mean, I find it hard to believe that the volunteers are doing all of the volunteer work outside of office hours in terms of, following up and promoting and checking on everyone and reminding everyone, do you have your pledge cards in? And, oh, by the way, we're trying to get up to a certain percentage of people, participating. And I mean, there's a lot of work involved. It's a huge operation to ensure that everybody that they're trying to blanket within these various businesses and, organizations within their realm in which they fundraise all are sort of covered. They all need to be solicited and asked if they will give to this campaign. So it's a major undertaking, and I find it hard to believe. And I know for sure that because Leah Anderson, who's the auditor over there, and was expressing similar concerns about, I told my employees in my section, in the auditor section, they do not have to participate if they want to. I'm not going to pester them. I'm not going to say anything. We're just going to politely say no. But she said, but, it's an annual tradition every year, for example, for the city of Sioux Falls, who also runs a campaign, to compete in some sort of cornhole tournament with the Minnehaha County Commission employees. And I don't imagine that cornhole tournament takes place on just the lunch hour or whatever when they're not on the clock. I'm sure that runs over or something.
So for clarification, this is a charitable event. They're raising money for the Sioux Empire United Way.
Yeah. The whole idea, everything that's done is basically to promote the campaign. So any events, chili cook-offs and various kinds of activities, every year they're encouraged to be as creative as possible to draw in people, sort of like carnival barkers or whatever. We want everyone to come to the, event where we're going to run the campaign and talk about the United Way and watch the video and try to get everybody signed up. And then of course, after that, there's a lot of follow-up to make sure that, have you turned in your card? Are you going to give this year? Come on, we're trying to get up to this percentage or whatever, of participation. And so there's a lot of involvement throughout the entire process, the planning process, the promotional process, and then the execution at the end, where they make sure that they've collected all of those donations. And then that information then has to be turned into the payroll department so that they can make sure that they process all of the donations through a paycheck withdrawal system.
This would be one thing if there's a private organization, so private business owned by somebody, but this is public. This is the taxpayer dollars being used for this.
It is, and that's my thing. I don't, begrudge any corporation that wants to partner with any organization. I think that's a normal part of their philanthropic model, right? So we all agree that that's good business to contribute to the communities in which businesses and corporations operate. However, it's a little different when you're talking about our public employees and our public resources that we pay for. We pay for everything that is occupied in those buildings, the buildings themselves, and all the employees that work there. That's not something that any particular agency or non-government agency should have exclusive contact over and the opportunity to do what they want. And then there's a question too, looking beyond just the access question, and the use of public resources for a private organization like that. There's also the question of, what about this organization? What exactly is a government organization? Like, for example, Minnehaha County employees, what are they aligning themselves with when they, give exclusive access to an organization like the United Way? That's the other major question.
Where is the money going?
Exactly. And how is the money allocated? What's the process? What's the application process for agencies that receive money? What added value or benefit is there to giving your money through the United Way? Why not just give it directly to the charity? So there's lots of questions that are raised with regard to, practice and policies with regard to the organization itself, if we're going to allow government entities and employees to donate their money through that agency.
So effectively, the taxpayer is subsidizing fundraising for the Sioux Empire United Way, and what does their money go to?
That's a great question. So I got curious about that. I used to be in an organization that received United Way funding, so I was very familiar with the process. And unfortunately, when I started asking questions about the application and allocation process, that didn't go over very well because it's really not a very transparent process at all. But back in 2020, during the summer of 2020, United Way came out with an equity statement. They said equity is the foundation of our work. We commit to equity as a core value and practice to advance our mission. We're compelled to prioritize historically marginalized and systemically excluded people to end the historical, social, and systemic inequities that persist in our community and throughout the Sioux Empire. And I'm like, Okay, if that's true, then where's the evidence? Like, I totally agree with you. I mean, I don't want to see anyone discriminated against. Can you show me evidence that we, if there's particularly the nonprofit sector, funded agencies who receive United Way money, how are people being discriminated against? Who's not being helped? Who's not being helped because of their immutable characteristics, because of the color of their skin or their race or ethnic background or their gender identity or any of these, categories that they keep expanding and adding to the application process. What I mean by that is when an agency is seeking funding from the United Way, they have to provide a lengthy list of data information on the people that they serve, as well as information about their employees and their board members. So, for example, what is the race? What is the ethnicity? What is the gender identity? And the thing is, those categories have expanded over the years as, DEI became, for people who don't know, DEI, diversity, equity, inclusion, this philosophy that we need to somehow undo, as they say, these disparities in outcomes based on systemic oppression. Well, that's a Marxist left-wing narrative. It's obviously political and ideological. It doesn't seem like the kind of thing that a nonprofit organization who wants to partner with a government agency should be utilizing as a metric through which they're going to allocate funds. Because we've had cases recently, Supreme Court's ruled against this with admissions processes. We've seen a huge shift in the political winds. The United Way here locally claims we're not political, we're not ideological. It's like, well, then why did you all of a sudden flip your policy? And now you've stripped all the DEI stuff out of the language. You've taken it off your website, but the applications remain. And I'll give you one example of that. Here on the child care form, this is the child care form, just one page of the child care form. So an organization that's providing, care for children out of school usually is what that kind of programs are. There's an entire section here on pronouns. Okay. So we're supposed to ask children, what are their preferred pronouns? I mean, and then if you're like, well, why would we do that? Well, in case you're questioning that, one of the things that was done in the DEI training seminars for funded agencies to go through was that they had a professor at Augustana University explain to you radical gender theory, so you understand what all that means and why it's important that but everybody knows that's just a mechanism of a sort of litmus test to see whether or not you subscribe to some sort of what we colloquially call woke, right, ideology or cultural Marxism or whatever you want to call it. But this was driven by people like, if you look at their DEI board that they created to implement these policies and make changes to the application, like putting on a preferred pronoun section, you'll see familiar names like Susan Williams from the Transformation Project. That's her life mission, is to essentially make, or I should say normalize this radical gender ideology. And the really bad thing about it is that I'll show you this document right here. This is the 990 from 2023. So all of the partner agencies, those would be the funded agencies within the Sioux Empire United Way network, are all listed on their website. However, it's curious that Susan Williams, who used to be on their DEI committee, her husband serves on the board of directors, her organization received a grant in the amount of $12,445. It's called a community impact grant. So I don't know if that's for some reason precludes their organization for being listed on their website as one of the funded agencies or not. But I don't know about you, but I have a serious issue with giving my money to an organization that's going to then use, some sort of intersectional matrix, what are the color of your skin, what's your gender ideology, etc., in praxis as to how you're going to go about fulfilling the mission and vision of your organization, and particularly when it's given to organizations like this that openly advocate for, I don't have a nice way of saying this, the mutilation, sterilization of children. That's their sole purpose, is to normalize that kind of, ideas, what they call gender affirming care.
So just for clarity, both our city and county and school district are all engaged in raising money for the United Way. He's using a lot of this for DEI woke ideology, which, quite frankly, is Marxist.
Yeah, and it's political. I mean, at best, you could say it's certainly politically leaning. It's not a nonpartisan or an apolitical way to distribute funds to organizations, for sure. And it's reflected in, like I noted, some of the organizations are receiving the money from that. And just on a practical level, I mean, we don't need the United Way to siphon money away from, people's hard-earned money and donations that they want to give in good faith to organizations. Why do we need them? If DEI is the process through which they're vetting organizations to decide who's going to best help the people in the community, that's not a good criteria to use. People should make informed consent decisions about where they want to give their money directly to the organizations that best impact the community. It's a much better way to do things.
Well, it's been very informative. So, final thoughts.
Yeah, I would just encourage people to say no to the United Way, to say no way to the United Way, or walk away from the United Way. We don't need them to decide where we're going to invest our money in charities here in our local and communities. And I would encourage you to just, invest your money wisely in organizations that you know and trust. And when asked, just politely say, no, I'm not going to participate in the United Way campaign in your office.
Dan, thank you very much for being with us. This has been the Making Waves podcast. My name is Dave Brotman.